Umutai kayu kanu, iya kayu. Umutai kanu, inna kayu. Umutaya kayu, umutai tayu. Inna
Hello, and welcome again to The Goddess in Art. This series is dedicated to the power and creativity of the goddess. My name is Starr Goode. My guest this evening is Janine Canan. She is a poet and psychiatrist in private practice. She has published 5 books of poetry, most recently, Her Magnificent Body. And she is the editor of She Rises Like the Sun, Invocations of the Goddess by contemporary American women poets. Welcome, Janine.
Thank you very much.
I'm so happy to have you here. And the first thing I want to do is share with my audience your book. And this is it, She Rises Like the Sun. And this is the poetry book. It's an anthology of 29 women poets. We have Mayumi Oda, who's been a guest on this show, is illustrating it. And it has an introduction by Jean Shinoda Boland. And I thought it would be very nice just to start off the show with a poem.
Yes, I'd love to read one. Here's one by 90-year-old Native American poet Meridel Lesur. Hush, my little grandmother. Hush, my little grandmother. I am a woman come to speak for you. I am a woman speaking for us all, from the tongue of dust and fire, from the bowl of bitter smoke. This is a song for strength and power. Water is pouring, water is running, the drouthy blooms. It is coming out pouring in bloom of day. Let us all go down there and bathe in the water. The water is coming on the 4 paths of the eagles. Let us all of many colors go down where the waters come, calling, calling to us in rivers of wind and blood. We are floods. We are Apache plumes. We are the brave cacti's rosy blossom, forgetting the thorns and the dry. We are glut of a strong thrust grandmother. Hush, hush, my little root, my empty pod. Hush, hush, my little grandmother. I am a woman come to speak in tongues of dust and fire, woman bold and filled with pollen.
I love that last image of the fertility of the feminine coming back and that song of strength and power.
Yes.
And I really want to congratulate you on this anthology because I find it very edifying the way you brought these 29 poets together and their different sensibilities and their voices. And of course, like I said, Mayumi has been a guest on my show. She's an extraordinary woman, talented
Yes.
artist, and she illustrated the book. And you've got Jean Boland, who did The Goddesses in Every Woman. So and you speak of this in your introduction, how there is a hunger for the goddess now, and that we see these images of the goddess everywhere because she's really acting like a muse, and really she is like generating and flooding the imaginations of contemporary artists and thinkers with images of her.
Absolutely.
And we could say that, you know, it's a new movement in art, and we would be right, but we could also say that it's the oldest tradition in art. And, you know, the work of Maria Gimbutas has shown that the goddess is the most persistent feature in the archaeological record. And I find your book a fascinating blending of you know, creativity and spirit, because you use the word invocation, so you're really you know, seeing the poets as priestesses too, and calling. So I was wondering what your thoughts were to call it an invocation, and what that was, the meaning of that was for you.
Well, all of the poets are invoking the presence of the goddess and the sacredness of life and the creative powers of the feminine and of woman.
That's right, they are, and seeming to really these images transforming culture too. I mean, just these images coming forth, and again, in so many different sensibilities.
Yes, well, as you pointed out, what really is fascinating here is the tremendous variety and range of vision and sensibility. The women come from all different kinds of ethnic backgrounds. There's Latin and Afro-American and European American and Asian and Native American and Jewish American women represented in the anthology, and women of ages ranging from 30 to 90.
Yes, we heard from the oldest poet.
Yes, I like to open with her.
And I also think just to say contemporary American women, just by using the word contemporary, it implies a tradition. You know, it does imply that there's, you know, that there's a tradition that goes back.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted you to read another poem that I feel sort of addresses this tradition, this poem Scorpion by a Native American writer.
Yes, Linda Hogan.
And I think it kind of addresses where we find ourselves today.
Yes, it does. She's Chickasaw, and here's her poem, Scorpion, from her book, Savings. In the old days, she was a god, living in dark furrows of earth-smelling earth, that woman the stars were named for. She was a god living in the corn husk and silk world that was torn open. She was sister to the heat waves rising up southern nights. Don't come close, crony of red sky, she lived beneath stones, those progeny of stars with their long waiting for what? Tonight she is exiled to cupboards and stoops. Even the stars and moon have fallen over summer's edge, burning like razed towns, charred heart and soul to earth. Surrounded by flames, she wants to sting herself to death. But sister, we've all been surrounded with no escape from mean fire and life or death. And there's a whole continent in this ring of fire, breaking into itself with stinger and beak, stopping its own watched heart, that prehistoric heart that remembers the gods of furrow and corn. That scorpion life, exiled to brown shoes and porches, knows something is wrong. She is crawling out the shoe, that danger to bony feet. Even the elements are at war. I see, in the old days, we were all gods, even the foot and its leather. We were all gods of shelter, all this fiery life burning like wood, and it does.
Well, one of the things that strikes me, in doing the show, The Goddess in Art, is, I've had a lot of visual artists on, and of course, the visual artists can go back and they can look at the archaeological record, they can look at the temples, they can go, they can look at the caves, the drawings, they can look at the artifacts, and they can see, the art right there. Whereas the poets, of course, from the Paleolithic and the Neolithic, we don't have any written record. So the poets really, have their own psyches to draw from and their own experiences, and which I feel like in that poem she's really drawing from, and that's what of course any artist draws from their psyche, but especially just the poets, because it is an oral tradition and it's not in writing, and I feel that that kind of speaks to the range of tradition and an experience that you do have in the work, and that just the different voices, like that there's no party line, and I'd like you to speak a little about that.
As Charlene Spratnick says, and I quoted in my introduction, I think that the very nature of the vision that all of the poets hold in common is the diversity and the all-inclusiveness and love of life itself in all of its forms. And as you said, the poets are reaching not so much to concrete artifacts, but into their imagination, into their dream life, sometimes into their religious heritages and imagery and tradition and literatures that are available. But I think beyond that, in some kind of soul speech that goes much deeper.
Yeah, I mean, some of the Native Americans have that tradition still extant, which we're really blessed for
Yes.
that we have that,
Yes.
and others, and of course you have African and black poets too. I mean, all, of course, American poets, but have these roots back into Africa, and Irish, and also women just drawing on this sort of spontaneous return of the goddess as an image and as a force to the
It's
culture.
fascinating, this synchronicity, the way the images are just spontaneously popping up. And there's just an endless amount of this imagery in every field of our culture, psychology, history, anthropology, the visual arts, and of course it's in the literature too. And that's how I came to make
Yes.
this book, was realizing that suddenly while I was looking at a display of visual art, but I realized this must be going on in literature, and in fact it is.
Yeah, and I commend you for drawing this together, and you know, because there's so much music and poetry, you know, in this poetry, and feeling and humor too. Yes,
Yeah.
But and the calling and the longing for the goddess, and I think that claiming of tradition, and that we are in an age of a spiritual and psychological rebirth of women.
Yes. Here's a good poem by Susan Griffin, the author of Woman in Nature, which is humorous and is an account of her first encounter with the goddess,
Okay.
how it happened to her, and it's called The Great Mother. I was walking in Tilden Park, ready to throw myself down a ravine, when suddenly from a helicopter parachuted the Great Mother. "Hello," she said, and immediately surrounded me in an aura of light and comfort. "Never again," she sang, "will you walk alone and in anguish." I was thrilled and about to express my amazement when suddenly she backed off and put up her hand. "Don't ask," she smiled. "I know your every thought before you even open your mouth. You wanted to know, why didn't I come before?" I opened my mouth to say no, but before I could speak, she answered, "In wanting to throw yourself down the ravine, your anguish was so deep that suddenly I knew you truly needed me," she said, and her hair fanned out green, the color of the oak tree growing from the ravine. "So I wanted to say yes, but there were other times I've wanted to throw myself down other ravines." Still afraid to offend her, I remained silent. "I know what your silence means," she said. "You are asking if I am the Great Mother, all-powerful, able to answer all cries of anguish in all parks, private and public places. Why did I let the anguish exist in the first place?" I said nothing. "A good question," she said. "You must already know the answer. It is," she gestured gracefully with a swan-like movement of her enormous sari billowing in the wind, "one of my mysteries." I gaped. "You must also wonder," she went on, looking now to the skies, "if I am so kind, just, and all-knowing, hearing every cry, how can I answer the 11,843 cries of truly significant anguish that come to me every 5 minutes on a statistical average?" I shrugged my shoulders. "Because," she said, "that is another mystery." She went on, "The Great Mother takes a multitude of shapes in a multitude of places: breast, womb, heart, chicken soup, Red Cross nurse, milk of human kindness, security blanket. These are but each signs of my eternal hovering presence. But only do I materialize when a true seeker—" "Just a moment," I said, beginning to catch my breath. But then she began to fade. "I am," I said, and then she disappeared altogether, and I whispered to myself, filled with awe, "I am an atheist." So she drove the goddess away, but not until they had had quite an encounter.
But I also had the sense from the poem, it's like, but I'm an atheist, you know, I mean, that doubt herself, you
Yes.
know, I mean, still holding on to the past, although she's had this transformative experience.
Yeah, yeah.
And that a lot of women reject, you know, the roots of this patriarchal culture, have been unsatisfied with it, that was the religions that they were brought up with, and said, well, I must be an atheist. But then as they're seeing these other forms of spirituality coming in, you know, like the goddess movement, and the Native American resurgence, and even like the Buddhism and things like
Yes.
the coming to the West, that they're feeling their own culture, and like you said, the synchronicity of the goddess around it, claiming this earlier women's culture, or a partnership culture, as Rion Eisler would say.
Yes.
That then it is something they're embracing, or thinking they're an atheist, and then but they're artists, and there's all this creativity, and that the spirituality and the creativity are really from the same wellsprings. You know.
Yes, Anne Waldman, who practices Buddhism, sees the feminine deity emerging in empty space in one of the poems in the anthology. Because,
you know, as artists or creative people, you know, you feel the power of images to transform the culture. You feel that in what we were saying before, of this being an age of rebirth of women and of nature. And your introduction was so excellent. You brought up so many good points to it. And you said that we are in this, a collective experience,
Yes.
vaster than we can imagine. You know,
Yes.
and part of that are these images coming forth.
Yes, that's what's so powerful. This really is happening spontaneously. And I myself began to write some poems of the goddess, not realizing what I was doing some years back. This is the first one that I wrote. It's called Creation, in which I'm visited by the creation goddess. 12 years old, I lie in my bed. How far does the sky go? The dark, stars arcing over my head. Something moves forward I can't take back to mother or father, and what I carry on will not return to me. Stars appear through the ceiling. Shadows move restlessly. Avocado's large hands reach through the window. The house echoes inside me. Mother roams darkly from floor to floor. Father passes through opening windows. He wants to throw out the old things, the unused. I fear for my doll, the quilt that grandmother made, the hand-rolled pillow embroidered with blue. I tell him no, I leave home. Now I must search the stars alone. I am no astronomer. From my bed I imagine great spaces, fiery sun, moon-circled earth, gassy Jupiter with frozen crust, myriad silver-ringed Saturn. A galaxy of suns moves milkily downstream, dusty white snake coiling in dark, emblem that bejewels a giant slowly stepping through space. I see the wall that surrounds us with the end. Earth can't last. The sun will die. Other suns cool and go. At the edge of my bed I look down. It goes all the way. I see the poets down there, lovers weeping in the wind. I hear a voice. You're made of nothing. You're the nothing made. Nothing made you. I have fallen asleep. A large woman beckons. Warm enough, she asks, motioning me closer. She leans over, laughing. She knows what I am thinking. But she moves on through like the waves, bringing silk sky, satin weaves, bright paintings, smooth sculptures, stretching trees, and the bountiful hills behind her. Alongside me now she offers her magnificent body. I lay my weary head on her breast and touch the beautiful curving mouth, the fine hand and generous thigh entering the pool of her pleasure. Are you going away? I ask. What do you mean? I want you here, I reply. Then say it, she commands, and I wake in my room streaming with sunlight.
So touching, and that transformation that you go under. And I realize that must be the title then you got from your new book, Her Magnificent Bodies, from this poem?
Yes,
Oh.
it was. Well, Starr, I know that you too have written goddess poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, there are many women who I could not include in the anthology, and poetry that's being written continuously since the book's been out. But would you read us one of yours?
Well, thank you for asking me. This is a poem that I wrote, and it's called Acacia. Sweet yellow freedom after school, walking the path into the green congregation, the acacia grove, my private enchanted world. Midway to spring, its first yellow blooms again. I bury my face in the blossoms, the endless yellow suns. I am getting old. The big white clouds are ready to move on. Where would I be without my sorrow, standing beneath a cut acacia spray, like my moon girl carved on a crystal vase, forever staring at the glass moon and stars, following the light that is always there. All along the canyon road, the light smell of oncoming spring. Such joy in my body. Sunlight and air join all the creatures in the woods. I remember climbing so high up the yellow bough, I did not know how to get down, how to return to the earth. The acacia roots are not so deep, but deep enough to stand and live. I want to live. Earth, show me the pure ways of that mother tree who once said to me, I have come from myself.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. Let's take a visual break. We've been hearing a lot of poetry. Let's take a visual break with some of the work of Mayumi Oda, who illustrated this book. Okay, we're back in the studio, and I feel that one of the themes in this book is the connection to the generations of women and this feeling of contemporary women to kind of do it better than their grandmothers did. And since I'm wearing a brooch from my great-grandmother, I'd like to read a poem by Mary Mackey that's called The Woman in the Moon. My great-grandmother married at 16, a blue-eyed Irish woodworker who promised to build her a life out of applewood and cherry. Instead, he gave her 13 children, drank up the rent, and died of blood poisoning while building a carriage shaped like a shoe. For 40 years, she lived alone, dressed in black, like a retired witch, in a house full of chests and chairs and wood clocks, waiting for him to come home again. When she was 80 and I was 4, we met. Her skin was so thin by then that you could see her veins like grain. She kept her teeth in a glass of water and her heart in a rosewood box by the door. There is a woman in the moon, my great-grandmother told me, who carries a bundle of sticks on her back. Each month she swells, each month she declines. She has married a burden and must bear it forever across the sky. Life bends us, she told me. My own life was scrapwood. My own life was sorrow as thick as a board. Tell all your daughters to build something better. Burn kindling, not carry. Keep one eye on the sky. I love this poem. I'd like you to read a poem by a contemporary black woman that I feel sort of addresses the situation of the contemporary woman where she, you know, we've had the grandmother or great-grandmother give the admonition, and here's sort of the process that a contemporary woman might go through. So share this poem with our audience.
Yes, a good one I think is one by Ntozake Shange, who's the author of For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough, which was, of course, a hit play on Broadway. and is a choreo poem. I'll read one of the poems from it. I sat up one night, walking a boarding house, screaming, crying, the ghost of another woman who was missing what I was missing. I wanted to jump up out of my bones and be done with myself, leave me alone and go on in the wind. It was too much. I fell into a numbness till the only tree I could see took me up in her branches, held me in the breeze, made me dawn dew, that chill at daybreak. The sun wrapped me up, swinging rose light everywhere. The sky laid over me like a million men. I was cold, I was burning up, a child, and endlessly weaving garments for the moon with my tears. I found God in myself, and I loved her fiercely.
Oh, so empowering. One final point that I wanted to make was I think that your book goes so well side by side Alicia Ostreicher's book, Stealing the Language, the
Yes.
reemergence of American women in poetry, and how she talks about the extraordinary tide of poetry by American women. Well, really, she kind of dates it since 1960, and how somehow poetry as an art form is really something that women are infiltrating, and she's really saying creating a literary movement. And of course your book kind of, I think, refines that point in a way by putting this spirituality or the return of the goddess in it. And we said at the beginning of the show the book kind of invokes poet priestesses, and really that ties into the first written recorded poetry we have by a Sumerian poet priestess, Enheduanna. And I know
Yes.
that your work, I wanted you to just speak to that for a minute and then like to finish it up with a poem you wrote about Inanna.
Yes, I and many women have become very interested in this Inanna myth, which is, as you said, the oldest available literature that we have, and it goes back 5,000 years to the worship of the Sumerian goddess Inanna. And this is Inanna's chant. Heaven is hers, earth is hers. She is a warrior, she is a falcon, she is a great white cow. She fought the dragon and slew it. She seduced the scorpion and tamed it. The golden lion slept at her side. She is the singer, she is desire. She is the mountain of silver, gold, and lapis. On her hips tall trees grow and grasses. From her waters spout and savory grains. Her lap is holy, her lips are honey, her hand is law. Her breast pours heavenly rain. She is the healer, she is life-giver. She is the terror, the anger, the hunger. Fierce winds blow from her heart. Hers is the thunder, the lightning, the glory. She is the morning, she is the evening, she is the star. She wears the gown of mystery. Heaven is hers, earth is hers. Who can argue?
Thank you, Janine. And thank you for watching, and good night.
Umuda